It's got to be so awkward when you go back to watch these YouTube videos and it's just like 2 minutes of silence at the beginning of them and then it finally kicks off. People, 2 more minutes to filter in here and then we'll get started. All right, looks like we've got a full house. So let's kick off our stand-up. What did we learn yesterday? We use a front-end server from React. That is true. We use Express. We used our Express endpoints that we created from Monday to get them to show up in the front-end app. Yep. What else did we cover? We used fetch. Fetch is a function that is built into JavaScript that allows us to make API calls in our JavaScript code to the endpoints that we already created. We used fetch with GET requests. We used fetch with a POST request. We talked a little bit about JSON and headers and how when we send some JSON, we've got to send it as a string. And then we've got to let the server know, hey, we're sending you JSON so you can pull that JSON apart. We covered cores a little bit, the cross-origin request, and set up our server to respond to our front end and say, cores is all right. What else did we cover? Any light bulb moments from yesterday that someone would like to share? Any questions about snippets of code while you guys were doing your homework? Anything that you saw in the news? Any questions whatsoever?
Oh, I'm not muted. All right, cool. So I was gonna ask, I guess like I know you kind of talked about WebSockets yesterday a little bit, not too much, but like um how similar like is like the stuff we're learning right now? I know you said it's kind of similar. Like one is just you're asking for like a request and then we get it back and so on, but like I don't know, like how similar is the transition to doing WebSockets from doing this is
Code-wise, it's pretty different. You still have a backend server, and you can still build your backend server in Express and use WebSockets that way. However, the architecture of your code changes a little bit, right? And so that will probably be most evident in what we are covering today with the messages and how we need to constantly ask the server, hey, are there any new messages? Hey, are there any new messages? And doing that every so often. The code is a little different because you are not only being able to send out messages, but you also have to write your code to say, hey, when new messages come in, I need to handle them and update it in the state and do all of that stuff. So um, functionally, you're achieving the same goal, right? You're being able to send data from the front end to the back end, and the back end sending some data to the front end. But because the back end can then kick off an event and say, hey, by the way, go push this to the front end, be prepared to receive this information, even if you're not asking for it. Your code does change a fair bit. So I believe Gus volunteered to do a session on WebSockets and kind of go do a deeper dive into polling and how we accomplish. I'm sorry, Ryan did. Thank you. Dive into all of that. So I don't know if he ever firmed up a date for that. But Ryan has probably 10 times more experience with me than on WebSockets in particular. So we're going to cover a little bit of polling today out of necessity. But if you're interested in sockets, definitely follow up with Ryan and see if he ever scheduled a time to go over that. He may also just create a video on it that you guys can watch later. Sockets are definitely where the future of APIs where the future of APIs are headed. The vast majority of APIs today still use REST, representative state transfer, which is what we're covering, right? Hey, server, I would like some information. The server gives you that information, sends it back to you, and then it's done. That's the REST in a nutshell. And so that's why we're covering it. But sockets are a good thing to know, and it's definitely certain kinds of applications like chat applications work really well over sockets. So it is entirely possible that your employer is already using sockets or is building their API using a socket architecture instead of using a more traditional REST architecture. So definitely good to know about it. Not a requirement. If I'm hiring an engineer and they don't have socket experience, I'm not going to throw them out the window. It is something that you can learn and is not a huge adjustment, but also doesn't have a big enough market share yet to quite justify us modifying the curriculum and incorporating that in. With that said, and based off of how much time we have at the end of the next modules, I will, if we do have extra time, I'm happy to teach a class on that towards the end of this. And so I think I mentioned this before, but we're reshuffling the modules a little bit. So this is going to be your intro week to Node. And then in the next 2 weeks, we're actually switching over to the database module. So we're going to cover all kinds of data modeling, what SQL is, learning SQL syntax, learning how we can incorporate SQL code into our Node and Express code, talking about something called an object relational mapper so that we can actually use JavaScript to interact with our database. And then after 2 weeks of that, we have another 2 weeks where we go back to Node and start focusing on kind of full stack applications of, all right, we've got every piece of this lined up now. We understand where the data goes in the database, how to structure it, how to do all of that stuff. We've got an intro to Node and Express, and we've done endpoints and all of that. So how do we bring those two together and build something from start to finish, front end in React, your back end in Node and Express, and then your database, your SQL database, tying all three of those together. So that's why there's a little bit of a shuffle where we're in module 7 now. We're going to shift to module 8 for 2 weeks and then do the final 2 weeks of module 7 once we're done with module 8. And so it's kind of, we did this in the last cohort. And as we were doing the module planning, we were looking at that and going, oh, well, teaching 3 weeks of the server and Node is really hard unless you've got a place to store all of that data. So that's why we kind of split it up like that. There was a little change up. I am going to be teaching both module 7 and 8 in its entirety. So you guys are stuck with me for another 4.5 weeks. Super excited for the database coming up. We've got 2 more days of intro to the back end in Node. And so what we are going to be covering today is the chat app. So we're going to start over in React world, start a new project from scratch again, and rebuild our chat that we built all the way back in module 4. We're going to rebuild that in React. Once we have that all working and state and all of that kind of good stuff, we are going to start architecting out our database, trying to plan what endpoints we're going to need. We are going to build out those endpoints, and then we're going to go back to the chat app and start layering them in with the stuff we covered yesterday using Fetch. With all of that said, I have a poll in the students channel in Slack. I believe I can post a link to it in Zoom for office hours. It is looking like we have a tie right now between Friday at 6:30 and Saturday at noon. So if you could vote now, and by the end of class, we will pick what office hours works best for people. Saturday at 9 a.m. is not far behind, though. So pick any and all the times that work for you, and democracy will win there. And that's just for this week. We can change it to a different time following weeks. I had students booking one-on-one times, and I went, ooh, I need to slot in office hours before anyone else books. So we will have that decided by the end of class. Any other questions? Kyle, good question. You asked, I don't remember seeing 2.thens before. Is that because of Fetch, or would you do that in Axios too? I can't say. It's been a little while since I've used Axios. Axios may do the parsing for you, the .json, and that's why we only needed 1.then, was because in the request itself, it was doing the JSON parse. So then when the data came back, it was already in JSON for you. So the reason why it's in 2.thens is it is because of Fetch, and it's because Fetch is saying, hey, we're giving you this response, but we're not going to do anything with the response automatically. So if you would like to use that response, you then need to do something with the response. And then once the response is in JSON, now you can use that JSON code. And so it is, it is because the way fetch is set up, and that is called chaining. And you can chain all kinds of things, right? You don't have to just chain promises. If you want to filter an array and then map over the array, you could do your array.filter and then your parentheses and your filtering logic, and then do a dot map after that and map through all your array and pull out the data you wanted and anything like that. Dot then is chainable, and it's just because the .json parsing is returning a promise. And so when we're saying then when that promise is fulfilled, when we've got that data back, that's when we want to do whatever logic with it. I'm going to check the schedule for Laura. I think she initially said this was an on week, but then corrected herself later and said that you guys are off this week with her. But I'm gonna just double check. Yes, you are off with Laura both this week and next, according to the public schedule. I'm going to share this link with you guys because it is public. That's the calendar that we use as instructors that we go off of. And that has all the instructor names and TAs, the module up at the top, and then what the week numbers are. So if you guys want to bookmark that or know what's coming up or can't remember, which teacher taught what module or anything like that, feel free to use that document. Okay, so mock interviews apparently next week, but this week you are off. Thanks for sharing that. Any other questions? We good? Okay. So I am going to pop open VS Code. I am going to share my screen. This is going to be an interesting challenge because we have going to have a lot going on here. We have our existing code that we wrote in vanilla JavaScript and HTML. We have our React code that we're going to build out today from scratch. And then we're also going to have our backend code with all of those endpoints. So if you remember what I said yesterday, if I can keep two code bases in my head at the same time, but as soon as you get to 3, it's like, so we are going to purposely avoid that. And we are going to work in just our front end first. So we're going to have our existing front end code up and our React code up. And we're going to get everything working in React world. And then we are going to close the old code base and reopen a new project for our backend and get that all started from scratch. So just to review, I opened up my code from module 4. I called my folder chat. If you didn't finish this assignment or you don't have that code, you can go back into the classroom repo and go to module 4 and whatever the last day we worked on chat was and grab the code from there. So whatever code I have up in here should be in the classroom code base. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click and I am going to reveal in Finder and I'm going to pop open my index.html and it looks like this. So we had a title up at the top. We made our chat bubbles that actually look pretty good. We've got edit and delete functionality. And then down at the bottom, we have our chat box. And if we type in ABC and hit send, ABC even shows up. We had a person is typing, and I believe we even got fancy and had the computer add in a message at the end. So this is all really cool, but we are going to go through the entire process of breaking this up into a React app. So for the purposes of practicing, we are going to go to VS Code, and it's always tricky. It's like a chicken and the egg problem of we want to create our React app to get the folder up and running, but we can't get to that folder until it's created in VS Code. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a file new window because I don't want to get rid of my my vanilla JavaScript code. And then I'm going to file open, and I'm going to navigate to my CIC folder, my code, module 7, week 1, and I'm going to open that. And now that I have my week 1 open, that's when I'm going to right click and say open in integrated terminal. Okay. And now I've got my terminal down here. I can pwd to get to my path to make sure I'm in week 1. And that's when I'm going to npx create React app. And I am going to call this chat front end with a dash. Hopefully it will be a little quicker because I just ran create React app yesterday, but we will see. Oh, and if you guys have questions, feel free to come off mute and just interrupt me. Like Alina just asked. I ran npx create React app, and I can copy and paste that in the so come off of mute and feel free to throw your questions out. Not discouraging you from DMing Karen, but the side effect of DMing Karen is that the whole class may have the question, and everyone can benefit from hearing the answer. So if you think it's a stupid question or don't want to associate your name with it, feel free to DM Karen, and Karen can unmute and say the question aloud so we can all hear it. But don't be afraid to come off mute and interrupt me. I think that's one of the reasons I was going so fast yesterday was I was like, well, I'm not hearing any feedback, so I guess I'll keep going. And Karen was like, I'm dying over here. So feel free to interrupt me and just jump in. And I will try and keep my eye on the chat too.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you. This is Latonia. Did you create a file in there? Can you open up your folder, your chat front end? I just want to see if I missed anything before I run.
Yeah, so create React app is what created all of these folders for me.
You didn't do a file yourself though, right?
Correct.
Thank you.
And so
you
now
folder?
create React app creates the folder for you.
Oh, okay, so I should delete that. Thanks.
That's a common mistake, and all of these tools are not the same. So like when we run npm init does not create the folder for us. We've got to have the folder created before we init. With create React app, because it's creating so many files for us, it creates the folder for us. So it's that tricky, like, is it creating a folder or should I create the folder first? So it unfortunately, there is no universal standard behind that. Okay, so now that it is done creating, I don't want to mix in any of my other folders over here. So I'm actually going to file open again. And I am now going to open up my chat front end. And okay, now I'm in my chat front end. I'm going to pop open a terminal. And I am going to npm start. And eventually I will see my React. So I'm going to try and slow it down a little bit today. Make sure everyone has a chance to follow along if you would like to follow along. And so I'm going to take a break and I will kick off the poll to make sure everyone has their React app up in the browser. Got 7 votes in so far. Give people 1 more minute. I think 10 is the magic threshold that we've been hitting, where once we get 10 people in, it seems like it is working. Yes, Latonia, once you have Create React App done running, you can file open again in VS Code and open up the folder that Create React App created for you. It's not technically necessary. You could work out of the folder that we already had, but I just like keeping it clean. Got 9 votes in, 1 more to go, and then we will keep going. And I'm just now realizing that npx create react app may be running slow if you guys have a slow internet connection, because it's pulling in all of the dependencies of React. And trust me, there are a ton of them. So if it is running slow, it probably isn't your computer. It's probably your internet connection. But we're going to keep going. We got our 10 votes in. Make sure I end that. Okay. So now we need to get rid of all this boilerplate, right? We want to just start with a clean slate. So I'm going to come in, and you want to make sure we're not mixing up our code from the beginning. We want to make sure we're in the React code. I'm going to pop open my public index.html, and I'm going to dump in my bootstrap. So I'm going to do getbootstrap.com. I'm going to get started. I'm going to grab my CSS link, and I will go back like I did last night at the end of class and add in those line numbers. I got resounding feedback that was helpful for you guys. So I will do the same thing tonight, where at the end we will recap and add in the comments and do that kind of stuff. So I'm going to add my bootstrap link in anywhere in my head tag. And then I'm going to go back over and I'm going to grab our JavaScript bundle, and I am going to throw that in right before the end of my body tag. Gonna save that. I'm going to come into my app.css and get rid of all of that stuff. I'm going to go to my index.css. I'm going to get rid of all of that stuff. Then I'm going to open up my app.js, and I'm going to get rid of everything in between the div tags, and I'm going to remove the logo import that we don't need. I'm going to throw a container onto my div, and I'm going to do a hello world. And I'm going to come back over to my React app and see that I've got my hello world. So I know that was fast, so let me go through that one more time. In index.html, I added 2 things, my link tag and my script tag, both of which I got from getbootstrap.com. I cleared out my app.css file and my index.css file. And then in my app.js, I removed the import of the logo up at the top and removed anything that was inside the parent div. And in case you are getting lost in what files I'm in, use my tab history up at the top as kind of a guide to see what files I have been in. And then once you're in the right file, your memory may catch up of, oh, that's right, we were just clearing this out.
Hey,
Brandy
Matt,
wants to,
go ahead,
sorry.
sorry, go ahead.
Brandy wants to know, is the Bootstrap bundle or separate?
I would just use the bundle. The bundle is this URL here. I mean, there's no major difference between grabbing the bundle and grabbing them separately. They're pulling in the same code. And then I dropped that bundle into my index.html right before the close of the body tag.
Excuse me, Max.
Yep.
Did we do the open integrated terminal for our chat front end? Or
Yeah.
anything else, because I don't have my React browser open.
Yep. So I right-clicked anywhere in this. That's not true. I right-clicked over down here at the bottom, just so I'm not right-clicking on a folder, and open integrated terminal. And then when that pops open, I ran npm start. And that is what should get our browser running for React.
Great, thank you.
You good? All right, gonna keep going. Okay, so we got our hello world. Now let's do our correct, Kyle. Everything is inside this div. I added the container here. And then I added my H1 inside of it and removed the import up at the top for the logo, just because those React warnings drive me crazy in the terminal. Okay, so your app.js, I will just copy and paste this into the Slack channel in case that is helpful for you guys. Okay, so now we want to take a step back and do some planning, right? And what I like to do is I like to look at what we're implementing and just have an idea of what components we're going to need, right? So looking at this, can someone start identifying where we may naturally want to separate this into different components? There are probably 5 components that I'm going to build out of this list. Someone guess at what some of them would be. So header body form, Jahil, I always put code in the student pasted code C2 channel. Header body form, yeah, let's break that down. Header is definitely one of them. The body, I would rename something else. The body, I'm gonna call this like messages list, right? Because body, it's like, well, body can be a lot of different things. If you tell me that you made a React component called body, I'm gonna be like, I've got no idea what's in the body of that component. So I would call this the messages list. The form is, it's fine to call this form. We may call it, message send or message input. I think I like message input the most. So we've got 3 components so far: our header, our messages list, and our messages input, which is where our form will be. Dominique, we're not going to do a nav because we don't really have anything to navigate to or from. Right? Looking at this, there isn't really any navigation happening. So we don't need a nav yet. With that said, I do have some functionality that I would like to add into this app. So we might be adding to the, we might be adding a nav down the road. So Jahir, great thinking there. The message bubble is what I would see as probably the 4th component. And we're actually going to create 2 message bubbles. We're going to create the message bubble that we have, and then the message bubble over here. And then if we have time, I can talk about how we can make that one component more reusable and merge two components actually down into one. But to get started, we're going to do two separate components there. The send button isn't going to be its own component because that's just going to be part of the message input component. We are going to use on-click on that button for sure. And we're going to use on-click on edit and delete as well. And then we are going to be using state for each one of these messages, because every time that we send a message, we want that to show up. And so again, just to draw that parallel, whenever we are updating our data and we want that data to show up in our HTML, that's when we need to use state instead of using just an old school variable. Any questions on that? Okay, so we're going to dive in. We are going to go over to our React code. And I'm going to do it like this. I'm going to leave my app.js up, and we are going to practice putting our components in separate files. And so best practice when writing your React code is that every component or every component group gets its own separate file. So that way you don't have this super long app.js, right? And so you guys probably had a little exposure to that, definitely in the homeworks, where you had the exercises and the exercises were in different files. So what we're going to do is I'm going to right click on the source folder here, and I'm going to create a new file called header.js. And in my header.js, I am going to say my const header is going to be a function component, and we are going to return h1 header goes here. You could create a components folder, Mel, because this is a smaller app and we only are going to be creating 5 different components. I'm not too worried about it. There is no agreed upon standard for file organization in the front end or the back end. There is a convention that we are going to cover in the back end called Model View Controller, or MVC, which is a way that it's encouraged that you organize your code that way. Unfortunately, there is no decisive standard for organizing your front end files. And so if we were to, the code that I work on at work probably has 300, 400 different components in it that we have created. And so obviously not only do we have a components folder, but we've got our components broken up as well. And then we also have a lib folder in our components folder that's short for library. And those are the things that we reuse in all the other components. So we will create custom components for like our buttons or our form inputs or whatever it is. And then we're able to reuse those components in all of our other kind of higher order components. But because, like I said, we're pretty light on code for this, I am going to break it up into different files, but I'm not worried about a components folder. If you would like to create one, go for it. Just keep in mind that when you're importing it, you want to be careful of your file paths and making sure that it includes it. Okay, I've got my H1 header goes here. I'm going to save. I'm going to come over to my React code. I'm going to be in the browser, and I have hello world. What do I need to do to get my header goes here to show up?
Import it.
I need to import it. And before I can import it, I need to export it. So I'm going to show you 2 different ways of exporting. I know you guys have already seen this. Hopefully this is just a refresher for you. I can export my const header here. And when I save and go over to my app.js, I can import, and then I use my curly braces and I say import header from /header. And now I've imported it. So what do I need to do now?
Reference it.
Reference it. You got it. So I'm just going to throw my header down here. And I know that that's a component that I've created as opposed to a standard HTML attribute because it's got a capital letter at the beginning of it. It's not a requirement, but that is definitely a naming practice that React encourages. Whenever you create your own component, just give it a capital letter. So I'm going to save, I'm going to refresh, and I got my header goes here. Okay, that's awesome. But you guys have also probably seen something like export default header. And now, because I am using the default, I don't need my curly braces anymore. I'm saying, hey, whatever the default thing that gets exported out of header, drop it into this thing called header. And so that also works. And because it's the default, I can really get funky and say header named something else. And because it's the default, it doesn't matter. Whatever is coming out of that file is going to get dumped into whatever file name I put here. So as long as I use that file name everywhere, you can see my header is still here. And to prove that I'm not faking it, we can just add a number on the end of it and have it show up. It is not common to rename your exports to something else, but it is definitely possible to do it. So I'm going to change that back to header because header is a perfectly fine file name for me. I'm going to pop that out and I'm going to take out my hello world because that's showing up. We know it's all wired up. We're good to go. Okay, so looking at my code, my header, I would like to, 1, be centered, and 2, I really like that styling there. I'm going to take a quick vote. If you would like to steal the style sheet from our existing code, give me a thumbs up. If you want to do the style sheet from scratch, give me an open mouth. All right, we're stealing it. You guys, oh, now it's a close vote. Here, let's do this. Gonna pop over here. I'm gonna steal it only because it's 30 lines, but I'm gonna do a quick run through of it. So I'm gonna drop this in my app.css because we already have our CSS file imported for us. So now that we have this nice and cleaned out, I'm gonna drop this in. So just to go through this really quickly, we have our header component, we put some margin on the top of it, and then we threw our border on the bottom of it. So as we pull those classes in, I'll do a quick read through of the CSS just so you guys are familiar with what we're pulling in. So what we did in our header is we used, instead of an H1, we use a semantic tag to say, hey, this is the header, which is helpful for assistive reading. And then I think we did this so we had some expandability down the road, but we did a div class name equals row. And whenever we do a column, we need to put our column in a row. So I'm going to create my column there and make sure you've got our closing div tags in place. And then I throw a little message in there, and I believe we put that in an H1 as well. So we come over here, we pop open our code, go over to our React, and not quite what I wanted. We don't have the line and it's not centered, but it's showing up. And so we'll take that as a win. So I'm going to come over here, I'm going to save, and I'm going to go back to my app.css and remember to save my app.css. I swear, I don't know what it is about VS Code. I do not have this save issue when I use my other text editor. So I think VS Code really likes to spite you and go, oh, your code's broken when it's working perfectly fine. So we save, we come over here, we refresh, and no, it really is spiting me. It is not working. Okay, let's figure that out. I've got my header, I've got my row, I've got my header, I've got my div class row. This is showing up. And in my app.css, I'm pulling in my CSS. Let's add a text center on this because that will fix one of the problems. Let's see if I target I will share the CSS file with you guys so you have that. Sorry, I'm just we shouldn't have, well, now I'm curious. We shouldn't have to import app.css into our header component because it was already imported in app.js. Yeah, that did not fix it. So because we are going to be using app.css across all of our files, we are importing that over in app.js. No, because we used Bootstrap in the other one. Let's see if we can just test our app.css. I'm going to target my H1 and I'm going to take my H1 and make it red. Okay, that's not working either. So we've got some issue going on with our CSS not being linked, right? So we want to debug that down and figure out, because that's a downside of being across all these files, is something may not be passing through. So what I'm going to do, I've just got a hunch here. I'm going to stop my React server and restart it. And I'm wondering if it's because we created a new... All right, we're going to go into the DevTools and we can see my, let me blow that up before you guys ask for it. We can see my color red here. And then if we hover over that, we can see that I was so dumb that I put quotes around red. And now that's working. Okay, so we know our CSS is linked. We still don't have our border working. So I'm going to take this out and I'm going to save again. And I'm going to keep on sleuthing in my debugger. And if we look at my div class row and scroll through my CSS that's getting applied to it, it does not appear to be there. Header row, got my header, I've got my row. We're going to make that a little bit more obvious. We're going to make this red. And I'm going to test something. I'm going to throw an important on there. Oh, it's not there either. Okay, it's showing up on the row itself. So it's probably something that I had wrong with the selector tag. So instead of doing a period, I am going to do a direct applies. And now that shows up. So the issue was we had a couple issues, but one of them was I didn't have the selector tag set up right. So what I changed it to is I said, hey, look in the header and then look for the row that is a direct child of the header. So what that CSS is saying is, because row is right here, that CSS is only going to apply because it's directly underneath the header. So if we ended up doing like another div class row in here, it wouldn't apply. We wouldn't get a red border on this one because it's not directly underneath the header, if that makes sense. Okay, so we're going to go back to our CSS. I'm going to change this back to whatever the color I had before was. Then I'm going to add in my selector, come over here. I've got that showing up, and I am ready to call that a day on my selector. on my header. So I'm going to pause. I'm going to share the header code with you guys. And I'm going to relaunch the poll. I should add another one in here that says, I got it working before you did. And again, the end objective is we've got our header showing up and the little borderline underneath it. And while you can go in, one of the few times I will say it is all right to copy and paste an entire file. It's fine to copy and paste the entire CSS file, but I would encourage you to practice typing out that header and getting familiar with that. And if you are just watching along and want to catch up at the end of class or for homework, that's completely fine. Just keep voting in the polls, no, but let's keep going, just so I have an idea, you know, so we can keep that 10 threshold. All right. Ooh, we've got 11 people in now. So I noticed that we just shifted from most people saying they were following along to no, but keep going. So if you guys have questions now or would like me to go slower or would like me to repeat any of this code, speak now.
I'll jump in.
Sure.
This is Sonia. So when my React browser popped open,
Yep.
I know it's not a browser. We had this discussion, sorry.
Well, it does pop open the Chrome browser.
Okay. So when it came up, it had my, what we did yesterday, my ad server. So yep. I control C and stopped because I assumed I put my chat front end in the wrong folder when I ran my stuff. And that's why I picked no, but keep going. But I'm following along with the code. Does that make sense? And I was just going to ask on break just to check and make sure I'm where I need to be.
Yeah, so you want to make sure, one, you have any servers closed out from yesterday, because in theory, nothing from yesterday should really be running today. So you want to make sure any terminals are closed out. And then two, you want to just make sure that when you run npm start, you're running it in the correct folder. So over in my terminal, I hit Control C to stop the server. And then I'm going to run pwd and make sure that the path that shows up does say chat front end. And I ended up in my src folder. I don't even need to be in there. I had that. I don't know why. And I always do Control C for the day. Like I shut down. So I don't know why it opened up in that. I must have opened it again at the start of class today and didn't realize. So if you run that now, the other thing you might want to do is refresh the page over in the browser after it opens, because it might actually be running the right server and just need a kick in the pants to say, yo, this is the server that I'm running now.
Okay, so just do npm start and then try refresh.
Yep.
All right, thank you. Sorry, class.
Alina, I will put that up. And I will also make sure that that is fixed in Slack in the code that I pasted there. Okay, I didn't paste the new thing in Slack, but I did edit the Slack message to have the fix in there. And the only thing that I changed was I added this right arrow in at the top. Perfect. Other questions? I do believe there are stupid questions, but I have yet to hear one from you guys yet. So I will. Don't worry. I will let you know if I do think it is a stupid question. But I think there are few and far between.
Hey, Max.
Yep.
Is there a way to double check like the import and export? I think I'm missing something because mine is still saying hello world, and I had messages with Dad at one point.
Yep. So 3 things that we want to check. We want to check that we've got our header in here, and I am using my default export. So that means that I'm not going to be using curly braces on my import. So I have my const header up at the top. I've got my export default header down at the bottom of that file. And then over in my app.js, I am importing my header, but I do not have curly braces because I'm using the default export. And then down here, I have added in my header component. And if all of that is identical, go back to all of those files, hit Command S one more time and see if it was just a not saved file.
I'm good. My import was grayed out because I didn't finish with header. Thank you.
That will do it. Yeah, Latonia, we are just at localhost 3000. Carolyn, what I'm doing to have multiple things of VS Code open is before I file open, I do a file new window, and then I can file open whatever I want from down there. And you'll notice in my doc, I only have one thing running. Ooh, someone just kicked me out of the Hack Upstate account for Zoom. Give me 1 second. You can see my beautiful green screen behind me now.
It looked like though you had 3 columns in your VS Code, like those were your windows and they were within VS Code? No.
No, this is a second window that I have open in the background.
Okay. How
Um,
did you get all the files into that one we're working with though? The files from elsewhere, like from module 4 in with,
they're separate windows.
they are
This
separate.
window
Okay.
is the create React app files. And then this window back here is all the module 3 stuff, module 4 stuff.
And then there's the other window, there's 3 windows?
Yeah, the third window is my browser.
Yeah, okay. I thought maybe there was some magic trick and I needed to change my settings. All right.
No
Thank you.
magic. 1 second, I'm gonna sign back in. Okay, there we go. All right. The problem is
Wait. Max, I've got nothing. Like my styles and everything, they're not showing up. I've refreshed, I've Control C, nothing.
go ahead and share your screen. Yep, that's where we want to be. We're going to go to app.css first. And that looks correct. So we're going to go to our app.js. And that looks correct. And then we're going to go to our header.js. And that looks correct. Okay, so show me what you've got. Oh, I see the problem. We aren't using header that's a React component. We're using header that is an HTML component. And so all you need there is a lowercase h. And then also, yep, you got it. And save and hop over to your browser. And there you go. Well, kind of. That's not as much as we want. Control C in your terminal and restart it. And I'm also going to pop you off unmute just in case you're saying anything and we can't hear you. Oh, and there you go. So that's a good point. Sometimes we have to just, like, if you can't figure out and you're like, everything is perfect, I swear it is, stop your server and start it over again, because that server is restarting so many times every time we change our code that sometimes there just gets gunk in the line and, you know, a bug in the machine, whatever it is, and it's not refreshing. By the way, in case you didn't know, the phrase bug in the machine or a bug in your code literally came because an insect was stuck inside a vacuum tube of the computers back in, 50s and 60s. So there was literally a bug that was causing the computer not to run. And that is where the phrase came from. Okay. I'm going to keep going unless anyone else has a question. Okay. All right, so I've got my header down. Now I'm going to go back to my code. What do you think we're going to do next? I start from the top and work my way down to the bottom. So I am going to get my messages list working. So I'm going to come down here and I'm going to create my messages list. And thinking about how I want to best approach that, we're going to do it like this. Okay, so in order to get my messages list working, I need to create yet another file called messageslist.js. And I'm going to do my export const messages list. And that is going to be another arrow function. And I'm going to return, let's do a p tag this time that says messages go here. And I'm going to come back over to my app.js and I am going to import. And because I did not use a default export this time, trying to shake it up and make sure we fully understand import exports, I'm going to use my curly braces and grab my messages list from my / messages list. Now, why am I using a /? What does / mean compared to 2 dots and a slash?
You're going up 1.
Exactly. So a / 1 dot means, hey, look in the current folder that we're in. So because app.js is in the source folder, we're looking in the same folder that app.js is in for my messages list. But if I used 2 dots, that means, hey, go up 1 level to wherever the source folder is and look for the file somewhere in there. Okay, so I've got my messages list. I'm going to save. I'm going to pop over to my React code. And I got nothing because I probably forgot to save something. Messages list, refresh. I refresh and I cannot load. Well, I think I broke something there beyond just my code. I'm going to pop over to my VS Code, and it's because I don't have my server running. I must have command C'd at some point. I'm just going to npm start, and that should automatically pop me over to Chrome when it is good and ready. And I got my messages go here. All right, so messages are going to probably be the most complicated thing that we're doing in terms of the state and getting them showing up. And so I'm going to say, look, I'm going to just steamroll right through that. I'll come back to that. I'm going to get my other component working. So I'm going to create my third component, which is called message input.js. And that is going to export our const message input. Got to watch your singular and plural here. And then we are going to return, let's just return an input tag for now. We're going to have to do a lot more than that. But we're going to go over to our app.js. We are going to import our message input from our message input. And I'm going to throw my message input in, save, come over here, and I've got my input showing up. All right, well, probably a good idea to keep going here, because in order for us to show a message, we need some way to be able to input a message. So I'm going to pop back over here, and I'm going to look down here and I go, oh, this is pretty good. I like the styling on that. So there is no shame in going back to your code looking at my index and diving into what's happening here. Okay, so down here, I've got my form, and we did our form as a row. So we're leaning into the grid system. And just because we're switching over to React doesn't mean we need to throw the grid system out. We have our on submit. And we go, oh, that's the old way of doing it. That's some old JavaScript. We'll go in and clean that up down the road. But I've got my col10, and I'm using a good old input, just like you used with Joey, and just like we used yesterday for the add front end. We don't need the ID on it anymore because we're going to be using state on that, but that's okay. We'll worry about that in a second. And then I used another column, and I dropped my send button in there. All right, let's go replicate that. So I'm going to say in my messages input, I am going to create a form, and the styling on our form, I am going to say I would like to throw a class on there of row, and I'm also going to add a class on there called input bar, because I believe if we pop over to our CSS, we have some styling on our input bar to make the border show up and to make that all pretty. So I go back to my message input. I've got my form rocking and rolling. I know that I am going to want to use the grid system here. So I already have my row. So I can jump right in and create a column. And I want that column to be 10 wide out of 12, right? And so remember, grid system in Bootstrap is almost always based off of 12. So a 6 and a 6 is 50% and 50%. The 10 is going to be, 10 out of 12 wide. And then the 2 that we're leaving is where the button is going to go in. So I've got my col there, and I'm going to do my input, and I'm going to use the class of form control because that magic is coming in from Bootstrap. And then I'm going to say my type is text. And then I'm going to pop out of my column and do another being bad, Max, class name. Okay. I have another div class name, which is going to be my other col. And in that, I am going to do a button that has a class name of BTN and BTN success. And that's going to be a type equal to submit. And then we are going to say send inside of that. And after all of that, I'm going to pop over here. Not too shabby. We've got our input working. And in probably a fourth of the time we did it the original time. So I'm going to grab all of this and drop this into Slack for you. And I am going to, Jahil, to your question, a row is broken up into 12 columns. Correct. So you can have multiple rows. You can even have rows inside of columns, inside of rows, inside of columns. So you can nest all the way down. But yes, you can have any number of rows that you want. And then the column numbers just determining how big that column is going to be. So I'm going to relaunch the poll and give everyone a chance to catch up or tell me to shut up and keep going. Or ask questions.
I know this sounds random.
Mhm.
It's kind of related. I know this sounds random. It's kind of related to the thing, but like, can we add like an animation or something to it? I mean, I'm not saying like for this project right now, but I'm saying like, can we like add an animation through CSS and JavaScript or something like that, or what do we have to do?
You can. There are, you basically covered the two ways of animating. It used to be that if you wanted any kind of animation, you had to do it in JavaScript because CSS wasn't powerful enough to support animations. And then that changed a couple years ago, and CSS finally relented and allowed you to do animations right in CSS. The way that they are written is very different, but the end objective is the same. There are also frameworks that I have used for animations in the past that allow you to animate without having to write any of the CSS. So there are frameworks like Bootstrap, everything that is built into Bootstrap. There are frameworks like that for animations as well that use CSS. So totally possible to do it. But because animating code isn't really a popular thing to do, we probably won't be covering it. You need what is in messages list. Messages list right now is kind of just a placeholder. It just says messages go here. Anyone need help? Have questions?
Are we still using all of these windows, or can I close some of these files? I'm just curious.
You can close out your index.css. You can close out your index.html. You can close out your header. And these should be the 4 that we are going to be working in.
And index CSS is empty, completely
Correct.
empty. Okay, thank you.
And you can close that one out. We are done with that. Last chance for questions before we steamroll to our 7 o'clock break. Okay, we're going to keep going. All right, so we probably want to get our styling working on our messages before we get the input sending up and all of that kind of stuff, right? So let's dive into that a little bit. Now, I'm going to go back to the code that we already have written. I can find it. And I'm looking and I go, well, I've got my div ID messages. That's great. Where are all my messages? When I go look at it in the browser, I definitely have messages there. What's going on? Well, remember, we had to use our vanilla JavaScript and our update HTML function. So in order to find where that code is, I'm actually going to go to my script.js and scroll up and I go, oh, here it is. Here's my div class row message and my column and the offset and all of that kind of stuff. So in theory, I should be able to just take this code, copy it, go over to our React code, and go into my messages list. I'm going to change this to a div ID is equal to messages. Then I'm just gonna paste that in there. And little cleanup we've got to do. We've got to change our class to our class names. So I'm actually gonna totally cheat here and hit Command R, which is gonna bring up my find and replace. And I'm gonna say find any place that we have class and replace it with class name. And I'm gonna click on this button, which is the replace all. And it's just going to replace it all for us. Then I'm going to save that and I'm going to look in here. And if you look down in my terminal, it's like, whoa, 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 buddy. You can't get off that easy stealing code. What is message? What is format date? What is going on there? And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to just take these out for now. And I'm going to say message text goes here. And format date isn't working either. So I'm going to say sent some time ago. And I've got my on clicks here, and that's kind of messy, right? Like we're going to wire those up differently with React. So I'm just going to delete that whole thing out. And I'm going to save. And React is yelling at me for using A tags, but that's okay. We're going to ignore them for now. They are just warnings. So we don't worry about yellow. We only worry about red. So I'm going to save that. I'm going to come over to my browser. I'm going to make sure I'm in the React tab. And boom, we've got a message. And I'm going to hover over that. And that is still working because we're using CSS for that. So we're good to go there. Now I want to go in and I want to grab the other message as well. So I'm going to go back to my old code. I'm going to grab all of these divs. I am going to drop that div in. I'm going to make sure that my divs are still lining up. And then I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to drop in my message goes here. I'm going to drop in my sent some time ago. And I'm going to change my classes to my class names. Save. Gonna pop over and I get message is not defined. But we're not just gonna look at this and go, oh, a message is not defined. We'll go figure out where that is. It is literally telling me exactly what line number I'm on. I'm on line number 16 in my code. So I'm gonna go back to my code. I'm going to look at line 16 and go, what are you talking about? I'm not using a message anywhere. So I'm going to come over here. I'm going to refresh and I'm good to go. So I've got my styling. That's looking good. I've got my send down at the bottom. I'll refresh this, can move it around, make sure it's anchored. All right, I'm pretty happy with this, but it's not particularly React-y feeling, right? We got our header and our header feels good. And we've got our input and our input feels good. But like we've got a lot of code going on here, right? And these are two pretty different things. And wait a second, we're going to want to reuse them. So we need to move this into components, right? Because if I have to take all of this code to get another message to show up down here, yeah, that works, but it's very anti-dry, right? Don't repeat yourself. And we are definitely repeating ourselves here. So we've got the magic of React. We might as well build these into more reusable components. So I'm going to come down here and I'm going to do this all in the same file. Now, there's a lot of debate of whether every component should go in their own file or whether you can group a couple components into the same file. I'm going to lean into the same file approach here and say any components that are kind of used together or make sense to logically group together, it is fine to put in the same file. That is widely contested, and some people say I would rather put it in a separate file, and that's completely fine and an option to do. But I'm going to come down here, and I'm going to say const, and instead of just calling it message, because we've got a lot of messages going on here, I'm going to say user sent message. And actually, I can just call it sent message. That's probably more concise. And my sent message is going to be a component. My component returns something. And what does it return? It returns all of this magic. I'm going to save. I come back over here. It's gone. What do I need to do to get my sent message to show up?
Somehow get it into the, I guess, first component.
Yep, I have to add it in here. And Shaw, I don't have, I'm sorry, Mel, I don't have to export it because it's in the same file. So I have access to anything that's in the same file without having to export it. Shaw, you are right. We do have to render it. We're not calling it in parentheses. We're calling it in braces, in arrows. So we're going to call it right here. And so we've got our message showing up. That's good. Let's keep this gravy train running. We're going to do a const received message. And that's going to do the same thing. And we're going to grab our div here and put in our received message. And then drop in our return here. I spelled receive wrong, didn't I? Did I get it right that time? No, I still spelled it wrong. Thank you, Latonia. Okay, and let's put it up here. And come back over here. And we have that working. So you could say, all right, that was a lot of work. That's little syntax. What's the point of that? Well, because now I can look at my messages list and say, oh, if I would like 3 received messages, I can use my 3 received messages and pop back over here and see my 3 received messages. All right, we're rocking and rolling here. Now, we will tackle props in a second, but we've got all of this and we've got no data structure, right? And so we need to start thinking about where we're going to store our data. And so storing the data down in the message itself probably doesn't make sense because we want to be able to control the whole list. And so you go, oh, well, I would want to put my use state in my messages list. That makes total sense. But we've got one little problem with that. How are we going to get a message from our send, which is a separate component, up into our messages list? We can't. And so what we need to do is put our state all the way up here at the app level and then practice passing that data around using props. So that may make more sense as you see it coded out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add my const messages and my set messages. And that is going to be a use state. Code is pasted in Slack. Okay, so I'm going to do a use state and my messages are going to start out as an empty array, right? So use state always gives us access to the value in state. It gives us a function that we can update the value. And then the thing that goes in the parentheses is what would you like the first value to be? So I am going to save this. I get a failed to compile right away. And now you can see why I like to keep my terminal visible while I'm writing my code, right? It's yelling at me and saying use state is not defined. So I go, all right, no problem. Import use state from React. Okay, I've got my my state started. We probably want to get a message in there just so we can see, practice with the data, get it showing up and all of that good stuff. So I'm going to pop over to my old code and I'm going to see if we have our message structure. We do. So we said text, we said I sent it, and then we have our timestamp with that message. So we've already figured out that those are the fields that make sense with the message. So I'm just going to grab that, borrow that over here, and inside my array, I'm going to load in that object. So when the page loads for the first time, we've already got messages we can work with. And I think I sent it is probably a bad variable name. We're going to call that received. And we'll say, well, but received is probably a bad name because I can't spell either. But we'll roll with it. We'll do a received. And then I'm going to just copy this and paste it, add a comma in there, save, and make this true. And then I will say, this is a message I sent. Don't worry, we are 4 minutes away from a break if you are lost. Actually, you know what? I'm gonna stop now. I'm gonna take questions for the next 4 minutes and then we'll do a break. So I'm gonna copy and paste app.js. And I'm going to copy and paste my messages list.js. Okay. Slack should be up to date. If you are lost even to know where to paste it, shoot out your question of what you're trying to paste, because you want to logic through, right? It's not just a matter of, wait, where did he put that? It's where does it make sense to put this? And so if you are like, wait, where did you shove this code? Just take a moment and think through, where should this code go? And if you don't know the answer to that question, ask your question. Oh, you're having trouble finding it in the old file. Yeah, I have trouble finding it in old code too. You have no idea how hard it was for me to write the chat app without React in module 4, because all I write is React code. And so when if you go back and rewatch the module 4 videos, I'm typing class name in everywhere. And I'm like, no, class name, not using React yet. And so this evolution of the chat app is one of my favorite things to teach, because you can kind of see the new way and the old way, and, you know, synaptic syntaxes start connecting together. Use state can take objects. Use state can take any kind of JavaScript variable. So you can shove a number in it, you can shove a string in it, you can shove an object in it. But what we did is we shoved not only an array in it, but an array of objects into it. So you can really use state to put whatever in it that you want. And if you are not following along, I encourage you to read through the code that is pasted in Slack or up on the screen right now, whatever is easier, and make sure that you understand line by line what everything is doing. And if you don't, ask questions.
Hey, Max.
Yep.
Would there be a reason in my actual file explorer, it's giving me module not found, can't resolve for like message input? It's not, this sounds stupid, it's not going to change color. It's white. It's listed the same as the file. The file is not showing any errors. It's just in the source file, it's saying it can't resolve message input.
Can you share your screen?
No, but I can take a screenshot and put it in Slack.
That works.
Okay.
Sometimes if you quit VS Code altogether and then reopen it, so like not just close out the window, but like go up to VS Code at the top and drop down to quit, sometimes that fixes your file import not showing up or it being grayed out. Sometimes it is that you are using a default export instead of a regular export, or vice versa. Sometimes it's that you are importing it, but you're not using it down in your return code. And then the other option is VS Code is just being dumb, and if it's showing up, you just have to ignore it. So you're talking about your use state? Oh, no, I'm sorry. I was looking at the cannot resolve. So can you send me a screenshot of your, you are missing the slash between the period and the file name in the import. And yes, my brain just ran through 50 different things that it could be wrong. And that's what experience does. It's like you learn where it can break, and unfortunately it just takes experience to get it there. Beautiful. All right, we are going to take a break. I'm gonna stretch my legs for 2 minutes, and then I will be back to answer any questions that you guys may have. We'll shoot to be back at like 7:15. I'll be back at 7:05 if you guys have questions. Latonia, if you're there, you can share your screen.
Thank you. I'll try not to chew in your ear.
No problem.
Okay, so
Holy split screen.
can you see it okay?
Yep.
Okay, so I did Control C, I stopped it again. This is all I'm seeing. That's why I asked about like the path. Did I do it in the wrong place? I did it from here, open. Well, you told me to do it from down here. You said do it right.
I don't know. Oh, that's good. Hit Control C in your terminal. And PWD for me.
PWD.
So you've got, yeah, look at where you're in add front end.
I am. Oh, I'm in that folder. So
I
what?
would take a step back and fix this in Finder. So I would right click over on any of the files over on the left.
Any of the files.
Yep, and hit reveal in Finder. Right click. And then, yep, And then I would close out of your VS Code just so it doesn't freak out when we start moving files around.
Oh, okay, so close, oh, hold on. Sorry, I'm in the wrong place. Close folder?
Yeah,
Or
or
that
just
folder?
hit the red X in the top left.
Oh, just do that? Okay,
Either way, I think it does the same thing.
okay.
Okay, so now I hate this view personally in Finder. I like this one a lot more because you can like kind of see your files stacked up in
Down here?
columns. Nope. This one right there.
Are you doing something? Oh, I
I'm
see.
dro-
Oh, I see. Oh, okay. Got it.
Okay, and so now if you click on, oh, okay, so what's in chat front end? You've got
That should be all
folders
working.
and folders. So what's in the front end? What's in that one that I just circled?
Yeah, what's in here? Is it?
And then open up source there. You like create React app twice.
I did?
And so you're nested. Oh God, you're nested all the way down.
Wow, how
Okay.
did I do that?
And what's in this source folder?
Oh my God. Can I delete a couple and just keep one?
Okay, so yeah, the one that we want is, let's go back into this folder. And then right click on this. And do you have the option to cut? I can't remember if Finder has cut.
It has copy.
Okay, so copy that. Scroll over to the left. And then paste it right. Oh, nope, right here.
In here?
Yep. And then go ahead and delete this chat front end once the copy is done.
Okay. So let's see.
Node modules has a lot of like little files in it, so it takes a while to
Okay.
copy them all over.
All right. Let me just. I'm sorry. I thought I had it where it needed to.
No, what I'm impressed is that you not only had chat front end, you had chat front end in chat front end.
But how did I get so many? Was that from the NPM starts? Because that's all I did.
Did you make the folder before you ran create React app?
I put it in the folder that I had from yesterday.
That could be.
It could be. Okay.
Yeah, you just want to be careful that wherever you run create React app it will create a folder in wherever you are running it.
You did just tell me that. Yeah, I have to I was kind of flustered just because I have mine organized by weeks.
Yep.
And a lot of times we talk in terms of the module, and I would have to look back through my notes to figure out what module of what day with what week.
Yep.
So that's why I put it in that folder, but I should probably just wait it.
When we like report our hours, it's broken down by week as well. I'm like, I don't know what week this is. Like, I haven't taught in weeks, like, how am I supposed to know? It's like, oh, I got to go back in and go figure that out. So,
should this still be taken? Wow.
You should have probably on your other monitor, like a little tiny skinny window that has the file copy progress.
On my other, I do. Okay, it's in another 4 minutes. It's moving pretty quickly given how much is in here.
4 minutes seems long, but.
Does it? Do you want to see it? You can move it over.
Jesus, React projects aren't 228 meg, are they?
What am I copying? Should I stop it?
No, let it go.
Okay.
I mean, it's not like a huge amount, but it's huge for what it is. Oh, well, mine's 150 meg, so maybe it is actually that big.
Well, you said Meg.
Meg. MEG is how you pronounce the abbreviation MB, because MB stands for megabytes.
Oh, I never looked at that.
MEGABITES or BYTES.
Okay.
So it
Looks like-
should, once it is done copying, I would delete it from add front end and then open up your VS Code again from that chat front end at the new destination. And then hopefully your NPM start should work from there.
So delete it from add front end. Okay.
Yep.
Just that one.
Just that one. Yep.
Okay, I can do that. Alrighty, and then reopen it in Visual Code and then do my terminal again.
Yep.
Okay.
And let me know if that still is giving you something old.
Okay, now I have another quick question. I'll stop sharing. When we started the class and you were looking up our previous chat app, I was confused. I thought we were actually copying, like running our React app there. You just pulled up as a reference of what we had done before, right?
Correct.
Okay. All right. Thank
And
you.
I opened index.html in my browser just so I could see, what the output of it was.
Right.
But yeah, I didn't go back and change any of the code in those old files.
Okay. Got it. Thank you.
No problem.
Hey, Max, is it possible for you to show what you have up again so I can pull my stuff back up, set my workspace back up, or even if you just type them in the chat?
You want to see the code?
I was hoping to set my workspace back up.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah.
And I can't remember all of them. I know we had messages input and list, but I can't remember. Thank you.
As you guys are trickling back in, feel free to ask any questions. We're not gonna tackle, I don't think, any of the stuff on the server tonight. We're just gonna finish up our React app, and then I will go over everything that we did again a second time, adding in comments as we go. And again, if you are not following along and doing your own code, you should be following along at least in the code that's pasted in Slack. So if you've got any questions about what those lines are doing, or where is this coming from, why are we using this line, I don't understand how it's getting from here to here, any of that stuff. Sorry. So I am going to relaunch the poll now that we have had a break and a chance to regroup. So if you would like more time, do not vote for anything. If you got it working, say you got it working. And if you want to just keep rolling forward, go ahead and say that. All right, we've got 9 votes in, waiting for one more to push us over the edge, and then we will keep going. Okay, got 11 in, so we are going 12 in, so we are going to keep going. So just so you guys know, the class right now is actually split 50-50 on where we're at in terms of people following along and people not. So if you are seeing me struggle in real time with the pacing, that is why we're literally split right down the middle of people who are like, yeah, just keep going, I'll catch up on this later. And then other people are going, whoa, you're going too fast, I'm trying to keep up. So that is the split in the pacing issue. Okay, let's keep going. So I mentioned this before, I don't know if we were back on the break or not, but we aren't going to touch anything in the back end tonight. We are going to get our front end finished up and working the way we want it to. We're going to play around with props and a little bit with the state. And then we are going to call it a day. We're going to go through all the code that we wrote today, talk through it from starting at the very beginning, kind of working our way through, dropping our comments in. And then I will leave hopefully 15 minutes at the end for any questions you guys may have. As you have probably expected, this will be the homework for tonight. And then the weekend homework will be turning this in along with your backend code, which we will wire up tomorrow and get our front end talking to our back end and do all of that fun stuff. Okay. So before we left, we had our use state in, and we added our use state. We said use state is going to be an array. Why is it an array? Well, it's going to hold multiple messages. And then we made the messages an object. Yes, we could make it a string, but as we learned all the way back in module 4, there's more than just the message itself that we want to save. We want to save whether it's an incoming or outgoing message, and we want to add in the timestamp as well. So right out of the gate this time, we're gonna use objects. All right, we've got our state working, and I can even come down here and console log out my messages and hop over to my browser and see that my messages are showing up, and I can pop them open and see all the information with it. Okay, that's great, but I've got my messages up here. What am I going to do to get my messages down into my messages list component? What am I going to use? Props. So I'm going to say, I'm going to add a new prop here called messages, and I'm just going to add my messages in. And then I'm going to save that. I'm going to come over to my messages my messages list, excuse me, and I'm getting props here. So I'm going to add my props. I'm going to actually switch back to my app.js and remove my console log so we're not getting confused. I have my props coming in, and I can console log out my props. And I can see my props is just an object, and my object has messages in it. And if I pop open my messages, I can see exactly what I did. But now we're in the child. So now we've got access to messages, even though it's up in the parent app, we can get access to it down in the child. Just to show you an alternative syntax, if you would like to use what they call object destructuring and say, well, I know what's coming in props. What's coming in props is going to be my messages. You can then use messages directly instead of props.messages. Seen it both ways, totally a personal preference thing. If it makes more sense for you to list all of your props up here and then access them directly, you can do that. If it makes more sense to you to use props.messages and remember that every time you're referencing your messages, it's coming in via a prop, that is also fine. But I'm going to save this. I'm going to come over here. I will refresh, and I will see that my messages are still logging out. Okay. So I've got multiple messages, but the computer never handles multiples of anything well. We need to break it down into singular messages, or into a singular message is the better way of saying that. So how am I going to do that in React? How can I say, hey, go through the messages and give me each individual message? Map, you got it, Shaw. So I'm going to come down here. I'm going to use a curly brace, right? Because we're saying, hold up, we're not going to use HTML here. Anything inside that curly brace, we're going to use some JavaScript. And I'm going to say messages.map. And what does the first parameter take? It takes the individual message that we are getting out. So I am going to just console log my message to make sure I know what I'm getting access to. And then whatever returns from the map is what React is going to show up for us. So we're going to say return message, as a string, message to show here. And then I am going to just comment these out for now, because we'll come back to using them in a second. Okay, message to show here, message to show here. Great, we had two messages in there. The messages are showing up. And if we look in our console, we can scroll down and see that we have access to our individual message objects. All right, we're making great progress. I can even say, instead of some dummy text, because if we look in our console, we can see that we're storing our text in the key called text. We can return out our message.text. I come over here, this is a message I sent, this is a computer-generated response. Okay, that's good, but we have all of our pretty messages components and they aren't showing up. So we're going to come over here, and instead of, I now need to figure out, I've got a sent message and a received message. So how do I get it to say, based off of the message type, return this component? There are two ways of doing it. Ternary operators are one of them. The other would be an if statement. So I think we've done enough ternaries, and because we're already in a block of code, I'm going to use an if statement this time. So I'm going to say if, look at the message, and what about the message do I care about? I care about whether it was a received message or not. So I'm going to say if the message was .received, then display my received, return my received message. Tonya, don't tell me I spelled it wrong. I know. Okay. So else it wasn't received, so it must be a sent message. Now, if you want to do this as a ternary, be my guest. You can totally do that. That is a completely fine use of a ternary operator at that point. So I come over here. All right, well, this is cool. I see my two messages showing up, but we had this before. So I'm going to go back to my code. I'm going to go back to my dummy data, and I'm just going to put another message in there just to make sure that we've got the right number of messages showing up. So I'm going to save. I'm going to come over here. All right, we've got our three messages. That's cool. We're looping over them, but message text goes here is not what I want to show up. So I've got some data that I know I have access to in my map because I can console log out my message.text, and I can see my message text in my console. So I've got access to it there, but I want it to show up in here. So what am I going to do?
Hey, Max,
Yep.
is there a reason we aren't testing it like with console log?
So we kind of are testing it with console log right here. Is there something in particular you're curious about, like what would come out in the console log?
Particularly where we would break it up to do, like, you can put console log anywhere for whatever one you're testing, but why we're doing it at that section and not for the entire block.
Yeah, so we're doing it here because we've like already broken it down to the individual messages. But as soon as I passed in this prop, I did do a console log up here. So what you'll see is as soon as I'm done using a console log, as soon as I know that that console log is working properly, I remove it. And the reason that I do that is because when you ship production code, you don't want some end user popping open the console and going, oh, look at all this data that's sitting in here, right? So console logs are obviously super helpful debug tools, but you'll see just out of habit, you'll see me just delete that when I'm done, once I've confirmed that that's working, and I'll leave it down here because that's like the level that we're working on. So there's nothing wrong with adding additional console logs wherever you're trying to test. But as soon as I know that a console log is working and I'm not referencing that data anymore, I will take it out of my code.
Okay, and that's not going to cause like a break loop, right? It's just if you had more than them, it just is harder for somebody else to get in and read it. It's not going to be a break.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
I can add my console log messages in here, but now we have this problem of, let me clear my console and refresh it here. Now I have, all right, I've got things here and I've got things here. And yeah, I've got the line numbers over here, but now I've got to figure out, like, is this coming out for my messages or is this coming out from my message loop? And so that's another reason why I try and go back, and even if you want to comment them out, that's fine to do. Doesn't cause any problems, just causes confusion when you're working through, especially with a loop, right? Where you have multiple things coming out and you're like, where is this console log coming from? Good question.
Okay, thank you.
Susan, you figured it out. We need to use another prop because we've got data in, this is now our parent component, and we need to pass that data into our child component. So I'm going to come down here and I'm going to say text is equal to my message text. And while I'm doing that, I'm going to also put that on my sent message. And I'm going to come down here and I am going to say, hey, my text is coming in and I would like that text to show up here. And just for different ways of doing it, I'm going to take my props instead and then show my props.text. And I'm going to come down here and I'm getting my props. And in my props, I am going to say, hey, show my props.text. I'm going to come over. This is a message I sent. This is a computer generated response. This is a message I sent. So we are decoupling our view from our model, right? From our data. And so we're saying, all right, we've got our array that's in the state. And when we get messages, we can just throw them in the state and they will just automatically update for me. Now, I'm going to show two different ways of approaching the next thing. We have our timestamp, right? And our timestamp we know is in our object and it says sent some time ago. And that's just the boilerplate that I put in, right? So there are two ways of approaching this. For the received message, I'm going to show the first way, which is, oh, we can add our timestamp in as another prop, and we can pass in our message.timestamp. So we come down here, we already have access to our props here. So all I need to do is say, grab my props.timestamp. And I pop over to my code and I refresh. And it yells at me. So to your point, Ariel, I am going to come down here and console log out my props.timestamp and make sure that that is getting passed in. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to refresh and I have undefined. So I know something is going on. Definitely at line 25. So I'm going to come over here. I'm definitely at line 25. My timestamp isn't getting passed. So I'm going to come up here and add in another console log to look at my message.timestamp. I'm going to clean out some of these console logs so we're not getting in the way and comment this one out. So I come over here, I wait, and it is not even there. Line 6. So there's my timestamp. It's showing up. So something must be going on. Message.timestamp, timestamp, props.timestamp. Clear, refresh, undefined. Because I was working in my sent message. Well, my sent message isn't getting any of those props. What is getting my props is my received message. So I'm going to take my console log code. I'm going to shove that down in my received message and update my timestamp there. Come back over here. Fresh. Now I got this. Objects are not valid as a child. Ooh, that's a nasty one. Well, it's got my timestamp, but it's yelling at me because if we do our type of on our timestamp, we can see our timestamp is actually an object. So we need to convert that timestamp into a string so that React can show it, because React is like an object. Whoa, what do you want me to show of this object? There are all kinds of keys on here. There's timestamp information. There's what are you trying to show? So I'm going to come over here and I am going to try actually I'm not going to use an array because what I want to show up is actually the string of the time. What it is saying is, well, if you're passing in multiple things, convert it into an array. And if it's in an array, we know how to show multiple things in that array. So I'm going to do dot to string off the top of my head, but I don't think that's right. It is. Okay. So we've got our time showing up. It's not pretty, but it's showing up there. All right, so that's good, but we still have to update our messages that we sent to show the timestamp. So in the receive message, we just sent down another prop, right? We sent in the timestamp. And we could do the same here. We could use another prop and add in the timestamp. Or we could get fancy and say, instead of sending in the text and the timestamp, we're going to send you the whole kit and caboodle. Here comes the message. The message is our entire object. It's got the timestamp information in it. It's got the text in it, and it's got whether or not it was sent. So down here, I now need to change my props to say, looking for the props text, look for the props.message.text. And then down here, we're also going to look for the props.message.timestamp. And for good measure, I'm going to console log out my props. So we come here, we refresh, and it's going to yell at us again because we're using the timestamp object instead of the string. So we go, we know how to fix that. We add in our toString. Come over here, we've got our timestamp showing up. And if we look at what console is logging out, we've got it twice because we have two components that are showing it. We open up our message. Our message is the prop that we sent in. And what is the value of that prop? It is another object. And if we open up that object, we can see the received text and timestamp. So we went props is the outer level, message is the middle level, and then the received text and timestamp are the lowest level. And so if we come over here, we see our props at the highest level, we see our message at the middle level, and then we see our text at the last level. Holy Batman, that was a lot. I'm going to take a break, let people catch up. I'm going to copy and paste this code.
Can you possibly scroll up in that file, please? I'm getting map undefined on mine. I just want to double check.
Yep, you want to make sure you're passing your messages prop in properly from your app.js. I have 3 messages showing up. And the reason I have 3 showing up is if you go to my app.js, you can see I've got 3 objects in there.
Thank you. I must have copied a different one because I have the opposite. I have 2 received, 2 incoming. No big deal.
Yep, and just to show the dynamic part of this data, if I want this message to go over there, all I need to do is change one of these falses to a true, and just like magic, it shows up on the other side.
You said we were going to take this to the level where we're actually sending messages to each other?
Tomorrow.
Great.
All right, I'm going to launch the poll just to see where we are at. If you want a little bit more time, just don't vote yet. Got 9 votes in so far, so gonna give everyone a couple more minutes. And if anyone is stuck or would like to share their screen, feel free to unmute and say so. All right, we've got 10 votes in. You can see some of you are still working. The good news is we only have one more thing that we need to add in here, and that's getting our message send working. And then we are going to call it a night and review all of the code that we covered today. So I'm gonna keep going. Just a little bit more. So we've got our messages showing up. We've practiced passing around props a little differently. We use props here. We use a couple different things going on. If we wanted to, by the way, we could change this to use our text and our timestamp and then remove our props from here. So lots of different ways of writing that code, whatever way makes sense to you, write it that way. The reason why we teach multiple is because it's very common to see these variations in other people's code. So when you're reading either open source code or some code that that a team member of yours has written at work or whatever it may be, you want to make sure that you can still understand the code and go, wait, where is text coming from? Oh, because this object is here, that is in place of where the props would normally be. So the props is literally getting destructured into these two variables that I just named right there. Okay, so everything's good. I'm going to save. I'm going to come over here. I'm going to type in ABC. I'm going to hit send, and it disappears. Okay, that's not what I wanted. So I'm going to come over to my message input, and I'm going to look at my form, and my form needs some on submit. So I'm going to say on submit is equal to a function that's going to get the event of the form submitting, and I'm going to add that onto my form here. So I'm going to say on submit, use my function that I just created here called on submit. And I'm going to first off do my event.prevent default. Just to make sure that my page doesn't navigate away when I'm done. So I'm going to save that. I'm going to add my constant because I forgot my const. Come over here. I'm going to refresh. I'm going to type in ABC. I hit send, and my form isn't clearing anymore, which is good. That's what I wanted it to do. But now I've got to get access to my ABC value. So because I want to be able to control that value and be able to clear it out after the message has been sent, I'm going to link my input here to use state. And so 3 things I have to do. I have to say text and set text and use state. And what do I want my message to start out as? I want it to start out as an empty string. Okay, that's step 1. I created my state. Now I need to tell my input to go use the value that is in the state. So I'm going to say the value of my input is going to equal the text. Okay, now I've got to do step 3, which is saying when that text changes in the input, go store it in the state. And so the final thing I'm going to add is a on change, and my on change is going to take an event, and the event is going to set the text in state to whatever the event.target.value is. And you can see my console is yelling at me because I need to come up to the top of the file and throw an import use state from React. All right, I save, I refresh, I type in ABC. That's all working. I click send. Doesn't clear, but I'm not getting anything. So I need to prove that all of my state stuff is working. So I'm just going to console log out my text here. And I'm going to refresh, and I'm going to do an ABC and hit send, and I get my ABC down in the console. Okay, I've got my text here. I need to get my text into my messages array. But my messages array is in app.js, and my message input, where I've got access to the text, is in a different file. So how are we passing information from the parent component down to the child component? Props. So the prop we are going to send is set messages, and we are going to pass in the set messages function coming from our state. And we also are going to need to know what the current messages are, so we don't overwrite all the current messages with just the new message. So I'm actually going to send in 2 props there. I'm going to not only send in the function to set the messages, I'm giving the input a heads up of, hey, here are the current messages, because I don't want to overwrite all the current messages that are there. I just want to add to them. So I'm going to save that. I'm going to come back to my message input. I'm going to grab both my set message and my messages. And then for good measure, I'm going to console log out my messages to make sure I have access to them. And so message input, you can see my array. That means I have passed my prop in correctly. So what we need to do is we are going to set our messages to an array, because that's what it was before. And we don't want to overwrite the current messages that are in there. So we are going to say, hey, grab the current messages and dump them in. Whatever the current messages are, we don't want to get rid of them. Throw them in for us. We are also going to throw in a new object, because each message is shown as an object. And I'm going to grab that from my app.js and just steal that entire object. I'm going to dump it in here. And then for the text, we know we've got access to the text already. So we're going to throw our text in there. Received is going to be false, right? Because we're sending the message, and dump in the new timestamp. A lot going on there. I promise I'm going to go over it one final time. Well, 2 more times. I'm going to go over this once, and then I will go over it in the final run through. So I'm going to refresh. It says set messages is not defined because I forgot an S when I had it come in as a prop. I'm going to type in ABC. I'm going to hit send. And there's our message. And we even have a nice timestamp of when we sent it from. So last thing I want to do, and then I promise I'm done, I just want to clear out the ABC. So when the message is sent, that disappears. And so all I need to do, I have access to my text from the state. So all I need to do is set the text back to an empty string. Save, come over here, type in DEF, hit send. See my message here. I see this clears out. So I'm going to come in. I'm going to find any console logs and remove them just to clean up my code. And I'm going to go through this one more time. So app at the top level has it's using some state, and we're loading up some dummy data. The state is storing the messages as objects in an array, and then we get access to the messages here, where there are a lot of things that need access to the messages. The header doesn't, so we don't pass in any props. The messages list definitely needs access to all the messages. So what do? We pass it messages that is coming from our state as a prop down into our messages list component. Okay, that's over there. We'll deal with that file in a second. But our message input is getting 2 props. It is not only getting the prop coming from our state to set the messages, we are also passing in another prop called messages that is also coming from our state, because we don't want to wipe all the current messages when we send a new message. So we actually have to pass in 2 props there. Fire truck coming for your brains on fire. Okay. In our message input, we have our form, and our form has an input and a button. Because it is a type submit, what happens is when we click that button and submit the form, our on submit fires and it comes up to run this function. our input down here is tied to our state in two ways. We created our state called text and set text. We said that is going to be an empty string. And then we came down here and we said, hey, use the value of whatever's in our state and then use the on change to set whatever the new value is that is being changed into our state using set text. All right. Now, when we submit our form, we've got to do a couple things. One, stop doing dumb things and refreshing the page. We will take care of this event. Now, set our messages to an array because messages have always been an array, but grab whatever our current messages are. Well, how do you know what our current messages are? They're coming in from a prop. Okay, they're coming in from a prop. We're dumping it in here, and then we're using this ... It's called the spread operator to basically say, take whatever the array is, and instead of putting the data in the array, take all of the data that is inside the array and throw it into this array that we are creating. Now create a new object, and the object has a text, a received, and a timestamp keys or properties, and the values of that are text. Where is text coming from? Text is coming from our state. How is our state getting updated? It's getting updated using our on change. Okay, we set all of that into messages. We think we're done, but you forgot about all that other code we have written. So set messages, where's set messages coming from? That is coming from our props. Where did that prop come from? That came from our app.js set messages. Where did set messages come from? That came from our use state. We are finally using set messages to update our messages. But now that messages is updated, we go back down to our messages list and go messages list. Oh, you're getting the messages. We need to pass you the updated messages. Dear Lord. All right, we go over to our messages list. Our messages list has messages coming in as a prop. And what are we doing with those messages? We're mapping over them. So now we have access to each individual message. Now we are looking to see if the message is received. If it was received, we console log out the timestamp. Then we go to our received message. Well, our received message is getting props as well. So we go into our props. We're passing both the text and the timestamp. We go all the way down to our received message, and we put in our text and our timestamp that are coming from our destructured props. That's just for the first message. So we go back up, we continue running this loop every time, and we say, all right, if the message is received, show the received message component that we created. And if it isn't, use the sent message and just drop in the entire message as a prop, as the object. We come all the way down here to our sent message. We're getting our props. Our props has access to the message object, and our message object has a text or a timestamp. We go through there, we loop through them until we get through all of our messages, and we are done. So something as simple as running this on submit is running it all the way back up through the parent to app.js, and then back down through messages list, and then from messages list down to our sent or our received message. That is it. My brain is fried. It took me 3 months to figure out this on my own when I learned React 5 years ago, and no one was using React. And I went, well, React seems to be the hot new thing. I'm going to go learn React. And I thought it was incredibly stupid that I couldn't access things that were in the parent until I understood the whole prop flow of, oh, well, you've got to pass 2 props in, one with the data and one with the ability to change the data. And that is because we are passing that magic down into message input. Message input now has the ability to go tell messages list, hey, you're getting new data, go update. That is it. I will take only easy questions now. I'm going to share the code. And I think I'm going to just leave it open for questions. I will add in comments for this whole flow. I'm going to kind of document this as I just went through it, right? So not taking the approach of how do we create this from scratch, which is what we did last night. Instead, tonight, I'm going to add in comments so you understand the flow, understand where the things are coming from. And so hopefully that will be helpful for you guys. I will definitely share that. Brielle, to your question, EVT and event, you can use either one of them, whatever your preference is. You could even use E if you wanted to. You know, that drives me crazy, but whatever you wanted to call it, that is fine.
Yeah, I just want to say, like, let's give Max some, like, a couple of props for breaking it down for us so easily.
No, we did enough props tonight.
Hip hip hooray! Hip hip hooray!
That was a good pun one, Max. I saw how you threw that in.
Can't miss a pun. Just, I think it's in my blood. So your homework tonight is to not only get all of this working, but compare this to our module 4 code and just start to draw some parallels between them. And so a question I am going to ask tomorrow is, what did we do in JavaScript, in vanilla JavaScript, that makes more sense to you? And what did we do in React that makes more sense? And Karen, if I forget to ask that, I'm putting it on you to remind me. All right, all code is in Slack. I will post it up into up into the Google Classroom as soon as I have some documentation to go with it. I'm sorry, into the Classroom GitHub repo. I will also create the assignment in Google Classroom. Basically going to say what last night said is go recreate this code in the repo. 25 minutes to work on that assignment now, or to ask any questions you may have. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, but if anyone needs me to share a snippet that you can't pull from Slack, let me know and I'll put that back up. Just to commemorate how great of an assignment this is, we have hit assignment number 50, guys.
I have another question that I've already solved twice. When we did the export header.
Yep.
Does it have to have default? Because I did it the other way you showed us, different from you. You
Yep.
had the two. So now it's telling me, obviously, it doesn't contain a default export.
So you just need to add the curly braces around the name of it in app.js.
But that's not going to mess up any of my other stuff because that's just for import and export.
Correct.
So I should not have any other error message come up, like example module not resolved again. You laugh, but I'm watching myself break it in real time. Should I just
So-
set up a meeting with you tomorrow? Is that what I'm looking at? Should I just set up a meeting?
You can, or you can share your screen now, or you can copy and paste the code into Slack, whatever is easiest. We celebrate different errors. So you may have fixed the header error and then, been going on to the next one, which could be still an import export error, but an import export error on a different file, which is what is most likely.
Okay, I'll try the default again and I'll see where we're at. I just want to double check because I'm like, I've already broken fixed this once with the other one. All right, thank you.
Oh, and Karen did share the 30-second feedback form in Slack.
I fixed it, thank you.
Glad you got it.
I forgot the backslash again. It was just that. I just forgot the slash. Okay.
I obviously couldn't do it off the top of my head, but there are at least 1,000 things that I know how to fix because I have broken them before. And that is what a senior developer means. It does not mean that you stop making errors. It means that you know how to solve errors more quickly. Glad that is your reaction, Brielle. Once you React is super frustrating until like you understand how it's all gelling, and then you're like, oh, I can just work with my data and like my HTML just reacts to my data changes. And it's like, oh, this is cool.
Hi, me again. I didn't see it on here, but I might have missed it when we were doing it. So why didn't we use the library for the time again? Or did we? And I just didn't see it.
Because we ran out of time. I didn't want to overload everyone. We definitely could use the library for the timestamp. We also did not add in our edit or delete functionality. And then we didn't cover the like the delay on the computer response message showing up, or the fact that like when you send a message, the computer message shows up after it. Those are all like bonus features that we did that I don't think I'm going to cover in the React app. And then the edit and delete, we will add in that functionality once we've got the endpoint set up.
Okay, so when I go to do this for my capstone, I can still follow the same thing I did prior and just convert it to React and I'll have no issue
Correct.
with the library and all of that.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
office hours 1 out Friday at 6:30 by 1 vote. So we will plan on that. Same link as this classroom as always, but I will see you guys at 6:30 on Friday.
Can we have those recorded, please? I know normally we do, but if we have them up, just because I think I meet with one of you guys on Friday night. I'm not sure if it's Laura or who. I got to check my schedule, but I just want to make sure I don't miss anything. Thank you.
Yep, they will not only be recorded, but live streamed to YouTube, so you can always rewind it on there and all that stuff. 3-minute warning in case you guys have any questions that are popping up.
Excuse me, Max.
Ooh, with 1 minute to spare.
I'll be quick. Since we're still doing stuff, if we wanted to like style this, should we just wait until after we're done with both the front and the back end to do any extra stuff? I've been following along, but when you drop the code, I copied it in just to have a fresh copy.
Up to you. It's easy to get lost in too many copies of the code. But with that said, if you want to start styling it, that isn't likely to break your code or prevent you from knowing where to put the stuff in that we're wiring up for the API. So I up to you if you feel like you're getting lost in the code already or have multiple copies or anything like that. I would say hold off. But if you're feeling pretty comfortable with the code and think you could do this almost from scratch, then I would go ahead and do the styling. Okay, it's officially 8:31. We'll let everyone go. Is there any final questions? All right. 30-second feedback form, last plug for that. Otherwise, I will see you guys tomorrow.